So my name is Lisette Carter. I want to thank Natalie for bringing me in because I don't know a lot of Hispanic people. I mean, I live in Oxford. So Oxford is like south of Worcester. Have you guys ever heard of Oxford before? In the middle of nowhere. And there's not a lot of Spanish people out there. So when I moved out there, I was like, where are they? And a lot of them are in Worcester. So I don't know a lot of Hispanics in the area. So it's nice to, get to know people that are. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background so you're familiar with it. I'm going to give you a little bit about my story. I don't have any, a big presentation because I knew it was going to be an intimate setting, and I want to be able to connect with you guys. So I went to school at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. Any of you guys from Puerto Rico? Yeah? In what part? Bayamón. I'm from Aguadilla. Yeah, so I went to University of Puerto Rico. I had a softball scholarship, and I went to study nursing. And really, I went to study softball because I didn't really care about nursing. My mom was a nurse, and she was like, well, that's the next step, so go to school. So I had a full scholarship, so I went. And during that time, in my junior year, I had received a phone call, somebody from Maryland that needed somebody to work part-time remotely training entrepreneurs. So I said, okay. So I trained entrepreneurs for about a year, and I learned personal development, communication, business. And I helped people that were engineers or doctors or people that were in high school, and I trained them how to go from business owner mindset or employee mindset to business owner mindset. Any of you guys own businesses at all? I know Natalie does. But it's just a different mindset when you own something yourself versus working for somebody else. So I did that for a year, and I kind of use it as a ministry too, because when you're helping people personally develop, you can show them scripture and you can show them how to grow in the Word of God. And so I saw a lot of people coming to Jesus because of the personal development side of things, and I fell in love with that. So a year goes by, and I'm sitting in my balcón, and I'm like, God, what do I do? Do I finish school? Like, I don't think that's where I'm supposed to be, because I wanted to go into the Olympics for softball. And I played soccer for the women's team in Puerto Rico for a little bit. And so my whole life was sports, my whole life. And I said, I want to go into the Olympics for softball, but that year they took it out. And they left ping pong in.
That's weird. Oh, wow.
Why? Why?
They haven't let, ¿cómo se llama? Patinaje de pista?
Oh, no? Figure skating?
No, figure, patinaje de carrera de pista. Hockey?
Oh,
No, patinaje.
like rollerblades, roller skates. Oh my God. So when they took it out of the Olympics, I was like, God, what do I do? And I remember sitting I don't know how to say balcón in English, in the balcony. And I was sitting there and I was saying, God, what do I do? But I wasn't really like asking. It was kind of like, dang, what do I do now? But I said, God, and I heard his voice and he said, move to Boston. And I said, okay. So I bought a one-way ticket and I moved to Boston, and I was in my senior year of finishing nursing school, or my bachelor's in nursing. And my family, they were like, dude, you're crazy. What are you doing? My parents didn't talk to me for 3 months after that. I didn't come back because I would go back to the States every year to keep up on my English and work, and then I would come back and go to school. But that year I didn't come back. So nobody understood, but I was more afraid of not being in God's will than I was in other people's opinions. That they're not going to pay my bills. They're not going to help me feel fulfilled. They're not going to give me divine direction. That's where I wanted to be in my life. So I say all that to say that after that period, I spent 10 years working all over the country, training entrepreneurs, and particularly women, and coaching them and showing them how to personally grow and deal with their relationships and also manage their new ventures, whatever it is that they wanted to focus on. And for 10 years, one of the main things that I learned was proper communication. I dissected it. I went into a lot of communication training when it came to relationships or clients or business or just communicating with yourself. So you're going to hear 10 years worth of communication training that I've had. So I'm going to give you a lot of resources. Make sure you write them down, because I've been to at least 100 conferences in my life, and they I've had notebooks and notebooks and notebooks filled with notes. And you know where those notebooks are right now? In my attic. Legit, in my attic. I've never reviewed them. I never went over them. And so it's important for you to understand that coming out of here, I just don't want you to take notes. I want you to write down the resources that I'm going to give you so you can further your education in communication and personal development. Does that make sense? Did I smile?
Yes.
Okay. So.
I have an issue with this group.
So.
Never finished your degree?
No. Nope. And now during that process, I trained entrepreneurs for 10 years, and then I started a real estate company with my husband, so we have real estate investments. So we replaced my income because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My husband has 3 teenagers, and we have a toddler now. So at the time when we wanted to get pregnant, my goal was to stay at home with her because I didn't want to put her in daycare. And so we bought up a bunch of property, fixed them up, we kept them, and I was able to stay home with her. And then about a year into that, while I was pregnant, I was reading a lot of pregnancy books, and I was like, I can't really read anything that really like touches my heart. What I'm reading right now is like medically driven stuff that might happen to you, like that scare you. And the books are like this thick. And I'm like, I can't read this. I just want a handbook. Like, tell me the real stuff about what happens in pregnancy. And I wanted it to be motivational. So I wrote my first book called Rookie Mommy. And I tied in the rookie from my softball days, from when my father used to train me. And then I didn't really do much with the book because I just had my baby and I wanted to focus on raising her. And then God told me, you're going to write a second book, and it's going to be a marriage book. But I was like, whatever. I don't really know when that's going to be. And then last January, he said, go. And that was the time where I was seeing marriages all around me fall apart, like people my age getting married second, 2, 3 times already. So I wrote the marriage book. I interviewed tons of women. I did a lot of research, and that's where I am now. Now my husband and I, we're building a gym out by where I live. So there's a bunch of other things that we do outside of this, but this is kind of like my baby, what I like to do to empower and motivate women. Because I want to teach you, my goal is to teach women how to think. Because that's where the battle starts, right? With your brain.
Figure out that you had that skill set or that gift or that passion? Because apparently you went to school for something that you didn't want to do in reality.
Yeah.
Then how did you, I guess I'm trying to say, at least for me, sometimes it's hard to find. So I have my job, but is it really what I'm passionate about? Not necessarily. So how were you able to realize that you were so good at this and therefore you have 10 years of experience and helping people with?
Well, so there's 2 things. You have to figure out what your gifts are, what you're really good at. And then the second thing is you have to ask for divine direction. You sit down in a closet with your Bible and you read it and you ask God, what do you want me to do? Open up the doors that you want me to go through so that I can walk in the purpose that I'm supposed to. Sometimes, like for me personally, I thought my purpose was to train entrepreneurs for the rest of my life and to stay with that company. But then God literally was like, no, you're done with that. Let's go another way. And so I didn't see that coming 10 years before. That was something that happened at the time. So those are really good questions, and I'm going to answer them as I go through the story. So some of the things, and I have my notes here because I will get off track and talk about something random. So this is more for me than anything else. And the communication talk that I'm going to be giving today, there's 2 foundational aspects to communication. And these are things that I learned all through training. And then I'm going to give you 3 other ones that are learned, that you can learn and you can practice all the time. So I say all that to say that you can use the communication piece, whether you're married, divorced, single, engaged. You can use it on your coworkers, your family members, your friends, whatever. So I'm going to give you a lot of stories, but I'm going to have my husband in. But that's when I learned the most in my marriage. So just don't take it as this is just a marriage talk. This is a communication talk that you can use all around. Now, I remember a time where I had woken up one morning, and I used to get in at work like at 8. And I got up one morning, and it was like 9:30. And you know how people are like, oh, my alarm clock didn't go off. I hate that. No, you just didn't set it, right? And I wanted to say so bad, oh, my alarm clock didn't go off. But I just didn't set it. So I was late for work. I call my boss. I'm like brushing my teeth in the car. I'm trying to get my head in the moño, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be late. I get to work, and I thought they were gonna be so mad at me. My boss goes, get in my office. I said, okay. So I go in her office, and she goes, listen, the new responsibilities that you earned yesterday, we're gonna take it away from you. And I'm like, why? And she goes, well, because you did this one thing wrong, and because you did it wrong, we're just gonna take it away from you altogether. So I was like, that's not how that works. You're just supposed to show me that I did it wrong so I can be better. She goes, that's how it is. People are complaining, so we're just going to leave it at that. So I was like, all right. I go back to my desk. I get a text from my mom saying, oh, Tia Mari, she's in the hospital. You should come and see her, but come tomorrow. There's no rush. I'm like, okay. You know how one of those days it just keeps kind of like snowballing, and you're like, oh my God, this is not getting any better. Then I get a text from my brother saying, because I used to run a vacation rental in Puerto Rico, and he goes, hey, I can't find the guests. They're not at the airport. And I had given him the number, and I'm like, are you stupid? Just call the number. Why are you calling me at work? Or why are you texting me? So finally, I get to my desk. I open up my emails, and I have 50 emails about the one thing that I did wrong the day before. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? It's just one thing. Why is everybody telling me? Finally, the day is over. I get in my car. I'm like, oh, thank God I'm going home. I go home. I'm on my way home, and my tire pops. And I was like, oh, my God, the devil's a liar. What is happening? My tire pops. I call AAA. Before AAA get there, thank God, the Mass Dot comes, the people that are already on the street, they come and they help me. I get home. By then, I'm like so mad. I'm like, oh, my gosh, what a day. So my husband calls me. He goes, hey, I'm on my way home. My husband's white. He's not, our European American. I'm renaming it. He's European American. So he calls me. He goes, I'm on my way home. Okay, great, because, I want to talk to you. And he's like, all right. So he gets home, and my husband's in construction. He's a mason. He lays brick by trade since he was young. So he comes home, and he comes through the door, and I can hear him coming up through his boots. And he doesn't even do this, like to take his boots off. And I'm like, oh my God, wait till I tell you about my day. Do you know that I went to work late, and my boss called me in her office, and then they said I did something wrong, and they took the responsibility away from me, and then I get to the computer, and I have 50 emails about what I did wrong, and then my brother texted me, my mom texted me, my tire popped, and he was like, not even coming in the door. And he was like, I just got home. Like, let me relax. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I let him relax. He takes a shower. He's eating. And I go, so how was your day? And he goes, it was fine. That's it. That's all he said. It was fine. And I'm like, okay. Like, what happened? Anything exciting happened? He's like, oh, it's fine. And that's when I realized the difference between men and women. We are wired completely different. And I'm not saying all men, and I'm not saying all women, because some men are, they like to, but my husband is not like that. And I realized that with my brothers too, because every time I call my brothers, I'm like, ¿cómo está? Bien, ¿qué quiere? Okay. I'm like, dude, I just called you, what's going on? Nada, lo mismo de siempre. And I'm like, that's it, I can't get much out of them. I have to constantly pull. So one of the things I had to do is I had to read a book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. That's a resource that you guys can read on your own. And it talks about how men compartmentalize everything and women are like spaghetti, where everything intertwines. So I can get in an argument with my husband on the way to a restaurant with another couple, and we'll be arguing in the car, and when we're going into the restaurant, I could be in complete tears, and they can tell something's wrong, but my husband would be like, hey, yo, what's up? How you doing? Like nothing ever happened. So I realized that there was a big difference, and I had to study that men and women are wired completely different, and so I can't talk to my husband the way that I would talk to a girlfriend on the phone, right? Where I'm just like, he doesn't care about the details. He just wants to know, was your day good or was it not? And why did it not? Did you have control over that? You know what I mean? Like, he constantly wants to fix a situation that I'm like, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen to me. You know what I mean? So they just have a different dynamic when they're listening.
More practical.
More practical. And you know what I call that? Weird little man logic. Don't come at me with your man logic, okay? I just want to tell you how I feel and just sit there and listen, okay? And just say, okay. I don't want to know how to fix it. I already know. I just want you to listen to me. They don't like that. They don't like people complaining at them all day long, especially when they come home from work. The second thing I had to learn that's a foundational communication principle is a personality styles. We all have different personality styles. There's 4 different ones. The first one is the type A, get out of my way, I don't care what it takes, I'm just gonna do it and I don't care what anybody else says. And they don't have any regard for anybody else's feelings. The second personality type is the detail-oriented. They want to know every single detail before they make any kind of decision on any level. The third one is the party. Hey, they're very social. Oh, hey, how are you? They want to know everything. They're kind of like go from one thing to the next. They're kind of forgetful sometimes. And then we have the person that's laid back that can kind of go in, like mutate into all of them whenever they want, but they're not really motivated. They're kind of like, yeah, I'll do it when I get there, and nothing motivates them, okay? So there's 4 different personality types, and I learned that from a book called Wired That Way. So when I talk to clients or people that I was training, if I knew that somebody was detail-oriented, I wasn't going to be laid back with my answers. I wasn't going to be vague with my answers. If I knew somebody personality where they just want a one-word answer, well, I have a mix of 2. So I'm like this, and then I'm also type A. So I just give me what I'm asking for. Don't give me the story. But if I talk to you, I'm gonna talk you to death. So what I had to learn was that if somebody was laid back, I wasn't gonna force an answer out of them because they weren't gonna give it to me. It was going to annoy them. Or if they were type A, I had to give them a straight answer so that they wouldn't get annoyed with me. So I had to maneuver those types of communications. Are you guys following along? Do you guys know anybody like that? Yeah. Type A? You know there's only 10% of us? 10% of us that are type A? And so that's why I had to learn the other 90% are not like me, so I can't communicate the way that I want to because they're not going to receive. You know when somebody says something and then it's not received, it's not delivered the way it was received, or it's not received the way it was delivered. If I say something and you don't receive it well, it's, and you're like, well, you didn't say that right. And I'm like, well, you didn't receive it right. You know what I mean? It just depends on your personality. So those are the 2 foundational ways to communicate. You got to know how people are wired, how men and women are wired, and you've got to know their personality styles. Are you guys good? All right, so the next 3 are things that you can learn, or you can constantly learn, because I'm constantly learning them all the time. So when I was younger, my dad was a state trooper for Massachusetts. And I know when he would get home, when he would take his change out of his pocket, and his change was mixed with bullets, and he would drop them in a jar. It was really loud. That's how we knew my dad was home, right? So we would hear the change and the bullets drop into a jar, and we would go downstairs, and my mom had already cooked the meal. My mom was a saint. My mom went to school. She worked full-time. She had 3 kids. Oh, that sounds like you. Now that I think about it, that's you, Natalie. And she had a husband and a household. How many know that when you have kids, husband, and household, those are 3 additional jobs that you have? It's not like, just work and home. You know what I mean? So those are jobs, legitimate jobs that you have, and they're not considered work. It's in society for some reason. But I digress. This is why I have my notes, because that's not what I want to talk about. I remember my dad getting home, and my mom had the food all done, and she would serve my dad his food first. And then she would serve us food, and whatever was left over, she would serve for herself. Is that anybody else's household or just mine? It's sometimes. So that's how I think the Hispanic culture is a little bit. They know the man of the house, he gets the food first, he's the provider, and then it just goes to everybody else. Well, my mom, that's how she thought. And I remember asking her, like, Ma, why do you do that? And she goes, well, because your father, he's the king of the castle, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right. And then she said this one thing. She goes, you can't ask your father anything until he eats something, right? And then I learned, well, a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, right? So I said, okay. So I tested it. And I said, okay, 1 week, I was like 11 years old. I said, I'm going to test this thing to see if it's true. So one day my dad got home. I heard the change in the jar. And I run downstairs. And before he sat down to eat, I said, Papi, préstame 10 pesos. Voy pa'l mall. And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay. The next week, I asked him. I waited for him to eat. And when he was done eating, and he was going like this, like unbuttoning his pants, I go, Papi, préstame 10 pesos. Voy pa'l mall. He goes, okay. He put it in his pocket, and he gave it to me. And I was like, oh, I get it. No problem. This makes sense. So, you know, when you go into a marriage or a relationship, you bring in baggage from when you grew up. Like, you think that your relationship is going to be like the way it was when you grew up. Some of those things, those habits. So, my husband's European American, right? So, I'm making him dinner. We're like 6 months in, and I'm making him a big dinner, arroz con gandules, tostones, pollo. Like, I'm making him all the Spanish stuff, and then Italian night, I'm making him pasta. And every single night, he would sit down at the table, and he would go, and then he would start eating. And I'm like, that's weird. Why is he doing that? So like 2 months after that, I realized that he was doing that. It was 6 months, and then it was like 2 months after that. He goes, listen, because he knows I'm type A, so I don't take criticism very well, or I used to. So he would go, listen, I have to tell you something, but I don't want you to get mad. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I don't want you to cook for me anymore when I get home. And the first thing I thought was, I'm a bad cook. Like, you're saying that my food is bad. The second thing I thought was, I'm a bad wife, because my husband doesn't want me to cook for him, and that's all I know. Like, that's what my mom did. So what am I going to do to, like, fulfill my husband? And he goes, no. And he goes, the reason why is because when he grew up in a single-family home. His mom, she didn't really cook for him. Like, he cooked for himself because his mom was working and going to school. And then his ex-wife, because he was married before me, never cooked for him at all. So he was always used to cooking himself. So I was like, but I want to. And he goes, no, but you don't understand. Like, I'm not used to that, and I'm getting fat. Like, stop. So I was like, okay. And at first, for like months, I was so offended. I was so sad because I'm like, my cooking is so bad. I can't believe it. But then I realized that the reason why I was kind of sad, not only because of the wife piece, but then I was like, when am I going to ask him anything? Right? Like, when am I going to, I don't know when to ask him. I used to ask him stuff after he ate, and now I don't know when that's going to happen. Huh? I don't know. But I was lost because I was like, what do I do? That's all I know. And I had to ask him. I had to start asking him. Now, this is the third one, timing. I had to ask him when was a good time to bring stuff up. Because I don't know if you guys know, but with men, you can't just say stuff when you want. Especially when they come home and they haven't even taken their boots off, right? So I had to ask him, hey, when is a good time to go over, I have a question, or I want to talk to you about something that's important to me, because you never know. It's kind of like you're being aware and respectful of each other's time when you're considerate about the timing. Also, when we're in the middle of a discussion, timing is everything. Because if we're in the middle of a restaurant and there are other couples there, and because we used to work with each other, we always used to have to work through this. We would train people together because that's where I met him. And he would say something like ridiculous, or like he would make jokes all the time, and I would think they're dumb. And I would be like, oh my gosh. And instead of me verbally saying like, oh my gosh, that was stupid, he's losing credibility and it hurts his ego. So saying something negatively that in front of people to somebody else, that really is a timing thing. So if we're in the middle of a discussion and we're about to get into an argument and we're in a restaurant, we've learned to be like, hey, let me talk to you over here for a second, because I don't want to hurt you. And that says a lot about me when I'm saying something negative in front of other people to somebody else. It just means that I have no grace and that I'm kind of a witch. You know what I mean? Another thing is kids. One of my stepdaughters came to live with us, and I have my toddler. So our conversations changed drastically because we didn't want our kids to hear us arguing or fighting, because my parents, I never heard that when I was growing up. These kids have enough to deal with. Their self-image, they don't know, if their boy is going to talk to them tomorrow at school. They have self-worth issues. Like, they have so much that they're trying to figure out on their own as teenagers. There's no need for them to have to think about, I wonder if they're going to divorce. You know what I mean? So that is something that I had to learn the hard way, because my aunts and uncles would always get into like fights and in front of their kids, and now their kids have issues because of it. Like, they have trust issues, or that's something that they learn and they bring into their relationships, and they think it's okay to cuss your spouse out and yell at your spouse, you know what I mean, all the time. So those are things, habits that we really had to take a look at and be like, you know what, we can't do those things anymore. Finding a connection, a time when to connect, like if you're in a relationship, saying, hey, this is a good time that I'd like to connect during the day. And there's a podcast called One Extraordinary Marriage, where they're Christians, but their podcasts are about sex. And so like they have this joke where like, do you know what to do with Vaseline during sex? You put it on a doorknob, so when your kids try and open it, they fall. They're hilarious. It's so funny. So, they have on one of their podcasts, they're like, we were busy with kids, we were busy with work, we were just so busy in our social lives that we didn't have time to connect during the day. So they made it like an appointment with each other to connect in the shower. So they would go in the shower every day. They wouldn't necessarily have sex. They would go in there and they would be vulnerable, because when you don't have clothes on, you're vulnerable, I think. I mean, you're looking at my hairy butt, like that's vulnerability right there. And that's when they connect. This is how my day went. This is what we should do with the kids. This is our schedule for the week. And so it's important to find a time to connect. For us, we have a date night every Friday night. Non-negotiable. If we're mad at each other or whatever's going on, we always have a date night so that we can reconnect for the week. Ephesians 4:29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that may benefit those who listen. That was huge, because I was like, you grow up and you hear, we grew up sarcastic and disrespectful and loud. And my husband, that was new for him. He was like, your family's very different from mine. You know what I mean? That's all I knew. So that scripture actually helped me understand. I mean, there's a lot of scriptures in the Bible about your words and how important they are. And so I had to figure out, okay, what are some of the scriptures that I can hang on to when I'm interacting with my husband, because I have a sharp tongue, or I had a sharp tongue. So this is funny. You guys are going to laugh at this. So my husband and I, we dated for like a month before we got married. Or before we got engaged. I said that wrong. I mean, it's still not a lot of time. So we knew each other, but I had no interest in him because he was married, and like I wasn't trying to date somebody that had kids and a wife. That's not my style. And so when he was in process of a really bad divorce, and I started a friendship. We started to be friends after that, and then we started hanging out. And then one day my husband calls me. He's like, yo, I got the ring. And I'm like, what? What ring? And he goes, I got the engagement ring. And I'm like, I don't understand. What's happening? And he goes, well, we're getting married. And I'm like, you're like, what? What are you talking about? Are you on crack? Like, what's happening? And he goes, no. And I said, but we haven't even, like, I wasn't even really taking him seriously because he had so many kids. Like, he had 3 daughters. And I'm like, I'm not about that life. Like, I don't even like kids. And he was like, no, you don't understand. I'm gonna marry you so I can date you. I'm not gonna date you so I can marry you. And right then I was like, oh, that was bold. Like, I like the boldness. So I told him he couldn't give me the ring until he had asked my dad. And my dad was in Puerto Rico, and he was coming for Christmas. So I said, you can't give me the ring or anything. You have to ask my dad for permission out of respect for my family. That's how we do it. He goes, okay. So he goes, but in the meantime, we're going to go have dinner. We're going to have Thanksgiving at my mom's house so you can I can introduce you to my parents. I didn't even know his family. I'm like, all right, cool. Now, I knew he had brothers and sisters. He had 3 brothers and he had 3 sisters. But I don't know where they are. Like, I'm assuming everybody's going to be there. I'm going to meet all of them. And I go there, and it's just his parents. And I'm like, where are your brothers and sisters? He's like, oh, they live far, and we don't really, talk like that. And I'm like, that's weird. Like, that's not something that I'm used to. So we get down, and, they have the, European Americans. They have the fine china. Fine china, and everything is like squeaky clean, and then you have to like put the bowl over here, and the forks are one way, and you're like, okay, what fork do I use? And the food, no adobo, no sazon, it's like healthy, and you're like, okay, like where's the pernil, what's happening? And the conversation is kind of like, how was your day? Oh, it was great, it's very like, it's very different from the way that I grew up. It's not bad, it's just different. So I came out of there and I was like, I don't know if this, in my head, I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Like, this is not working. Like, there was no music in the background. Like, there was like, the news was on, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, this is so weird. So Christmas time comes, and I go, let's go to my aunt's house for Christmas and invite your parents because, invite them because, they're going to want to know, what's good. And he's like, okay. So they go through the door, and they're like, oh, hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. And then my aunts all come through with guidos and, like, everything. They're like, parranda! Ah! Somebody comes in with a coquito. Like, somebody's like, well, hi, ¿cómo está? And everybody is yelling, but we're just talking, like, hey, ¿cómo está, bendición? And they don't really understand the language, they don't know what's going on. So we're having a huge parranda in the whole house. Everybody's like making a line. There's food everywhere. Then they put on salsa. Everybody's dancing. Everybody's having a great time. And then I look over and go, I should check on my in-laws. And I go check on them, and they're on the couch like, what's happening? And my husband, I'm like, honey, let me get you some food. This is pasteles, this is tostones. And he's like, oh, no, I can get my own food. Thank you. Like, I didn't know. I thought, let me serve you. And he's like, oh, no. I'll get my own stuff. Thank you. So that really, when we left there, my husband goes, I don't know what just happened. Like, that was Christmas. Wow, like, that was crazy. And he's like, but I love coquito. Like, I love coquito. It was so funny. And I'm like, well, that's what it is. And when we would talk in the house, and my dad used to be like half deaf, like he was hard of hearing. So that was even worse because we would talk to my dad and be like, Papi, like it was really loud. So when I was interacting with my husband in the house, I was loud, I was sarcastic, I was disrespectful, but like trying to be funny. Like, you are with your brothers, my brothers are redheads because my mom's a redhead. My dad's dark. But my brothers only came out with red hair. And they call one of my brothers Tinte. So, where I was like, Tinte, ¿cómo está? What happened to your hair? Like, just make jokes. You're joking around with people. And my husband was like, when you're in the middle of an argument with somebody and you become sarcastic, like, this is a good example. Honey, you ask him to take out the trash, and then a couple days go by, and you're like, why didn't you take out the trash? You know what I mean? Like, what's the matter with you? And then you start getting sarcastic, like, are you allergic to trash? Like, do you want it to build up here? And you start talking to each other in a way that starts to be disrespectful. And so those are the things with tone and volume. Those are 2 of the other ones that I had to really learn to control. My tone was constantly sarcastic all the time. And I used to love sarcasm. Like, I'm like, this is my best friend. But people what I learned with sarcasm is it's anger in a clown suit. So it's when I had a problem with somebody, or I wanted to make fun of somebody and make myself feel better, or you weren't doing something, so I'm going to be sarcastic and maybe you'll get it. That is really just me not being able to express my anger properly. Okay, not being able to say, hey, it hurts my feelings when you don't take out the trash because I feel like you don't want to help me around the house. Instead of saying that, I'd be like, I can't believe you didn't take out the trash. What's the matter with you? You know what I mean? And it's a direct hit at his character. The volume is a whole nother thing. Because look, I'm talking loud and I have a mic. Like, why? Why am I doing that? I should be talking normal, right? That's another thing I had to work on. When we were in the middle of an argument, it's hard to argue with somebody that isn't yelling back. So I had to make a conscious effort that when I would be yelling at him, that if he was yelling at me back, I had to lower my volume. You know what I'm saying? And just kind of get back on track on the route. Because anytime that you start yelling at somebody or insulting them or you become sarcastic, it doesn't make you want to change your behavior, right? Right? Like when somebody tells you to do something and they're rude and you're like, really? You think that's going to make me go do it? So those are things that I had to learn along the way that really changed the dynamic of our conversation. Cussing at each other was another thing because I was quick to drop an F-bomb real quick. So quick. And then I was quick to cuss him out in Spanish because he didn't know what I was saying. And he'd be like, I don't know what that means. You know, and you're like, that's too bad for you. But I got it out. So whatever. And so we had to really put an importance on, okay, let's lower the volume. There's no need to get upset and let's not cuss each other. And if it gets to that point, we need to separate, cool off, and figure out, okay, what is it that he's saying that I'm not getting? How can I word this a little bit better so it's not an attack on his character? Does that make sense? So another thing is offense. Now, this is huge because the enemy loves to use offense all the time. We were in like our first year, everything happens in the first year of marriage for some reason. I was folding his clothes, right? And I was folding his whites, and my husband's in construction, so his whites need to look a certain way, his clothes. And I'm folding his clothes, and I'm on the bed, and I'm folding them, and I hear the door open, and he's coming around, and he's like eyeballing me. He's like, and I'm like, oh God, what do you want? What are you going to tell me now? And he goes, can I just give you some advice? And I'm like, no. And he goes, can I just show you how I fold my whites? And I was like, no. And he goes, let me show you. So he shows me, and I'm sitting there like, this guy, I was really thinking, this mother is showing me how to fold his clothes. He should be lucky he has somebody folding his clothes. He should be so thankful right now that I'm folding his clothes. And he showed me how to do them. He goes, that's how I need them to be done. And I'm like, I'm never folding this guy's clothes again. You fold your own clothes. And I have this picture. You guys know what this is? You see that?
A door. It's a door?
2 holes in the door. First year of marriage and 7th year of marriage. Still sitting there. And don't worry, my husband never laid a hand on me. He's never hit me. But this was the day, this first one right here, was the day that I was like, you better pray to God that you find another wife that'll fold the clothes that you want them to, and cuss him out. And he was so mad, he punched the door. Then I realized a week later that the reason why he was showing me was because his boss required him to look a certain way, and he didn't want to iron, and he knew I hated to iron. So he was like, I was just showing you to cut down your time so you don't have to iron the stuff. And I was like, oh, sorry. So what happens is with offense is that Satan will use that. When you take offense to something, he'll literally use it to open up the door to other things when you accept it. And my husband had to tell me, I didn't wake up anytime he thinks I'm taking offense to something that he's saying or I'm receiving something that's not delivered the right way. He would say to me, I didn't wake up asking myself, how can I piss Lisette off today? You know what I mean? You have to think about when people are saying things to you, are they saying it with the intention of hurting you, or are they saying it in a way that they only know how to deliver it? And I had to really think about that. And I read this book called The Bait of Satan, where the enemy literally takes offense. When somebody gets offended by something, it opens up the doors to other spirits and other things that allow you to snowball in your beliefs, and you become derailed from being productive or connecting with people. So if you're constantly offended by, this is a whole nother talk. Natalie, you're going to have me come in for this one. But if you're constantly offended by what's on social media or what's happening in politics or what the president is doing or by what your mom said or what your husband is showing you how to fold his laundry, if you're constantly offended by those things, you really do have to understand that Satan is winning. He's like, all right, I'm getting her to do that because she's not being focused on connecting people with Jesus. She's not being focused on, the original intent or grace. And so anytime that offense takes place, it's a seed. So the way that this is what I love to do right here. The way Satan works is that he plants a seed in your mind. And you have your thoughts come from three places. They either come experience from your past, they come from the enemy, which is the devil, or they come from God. And the moment you accept a seed from the enemy, such as you'll always be depressed, or you're never enough, or you're not a good wife because your husband doesn't like your cooking, or you're folding those wrong. The moment that I accept that seed, I'm literally accepting the lies that the Satan is giving me. A lot of time we think that our thoughts are our own, but they're not. They're thoughts that the enemy is putting into our mind. And that's why I always tell people to read their freaking Bibles, because there's things in there that help you understand how to think. It teaches you how to think. Philippians 4:8, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. This is how, I don't mean to get into like medical stuff, but whenever you have a positive thought, there are branches in your brain and neurons that grow. And then whenever you have a negative thought, those same ones die. I got that from Switch on Your Brain. Is a good book about that, about depression and anxiety and how to overcome that and how science is just working up to the Bible. And so,
What is it?
Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf, I think. Yep. And that really does talk about the science behind positive thoughts and negative thoughts and how you can overcome. See, our bodies are designed for us to have dominion over, because you have your spirit, your soul, and you have your body. And you can grow all three. You can grow your body by going to the gym and eating right. You can grow your soul it's your mind, your will, and your emotions, by personal development, by reading the right books, associating with the right people, listening to the right audios. You can grow your spirit by spending time with God and being in your Bible. And so you don't want your body or your soul to be bigger than your spirit. You have to grow your spirit as a muscle. You have to grow it so it overtakes the other two. So when your body says, I want to go to Chili's and get a Molten, because my body says that a lot. No joke. I always want to get a Molten. I'm like, honey, let's go get a Molten. He's like, aren't you on a diet? Like, why are you even thinking about that?
I work at a bakery, so I have this argument every shift.
Oh my gosh.
Every shift, I have this, like, you don't need that double chocolate
You don't.
cookie. You don't need that Ferrero Rocher cupcake.
You don't.
It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie.
That sounds really good. What is that? Ferrero Rocher cupcake?
Well, now I feel like I'm confused, but we have cupcakes. We have different cupcake stuffed with different things.
Oh, yeah. I just stuffed cupcakes with Nutella on Monday. No joke. But it's important for you to understand that those are things that will derail you, and if you accept those thoughts, like I used to have depression and anxiety when I was growing up, and it was because some baggage that you have when you go into marriage, like sexual and physical abuse that I had when I was younger. And I thank God my counselor when I was in college, my psychologist, was a Christian, because he taught me that depression and anxiety are spirits. And when I learned that, thank God they didn't put me on meds for that. When I learned that they were spirits and that I could overcome my brain and with the word of God and with just this scripture alone, there's tons of scriptures, but whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything that is excellent or praiseworthy, it tells you how to think, the Bible. So if you guys ever sat in your beds at night and you start thinking about stuff and you just start keep thinking and thinking and thinking, we just had this conversation, and then you start like, okay, what do I got to do tomorrow? And you're like, what if I get in a car accident tomorrow? And you're like, oh my gosh, what would happen if, my brother died You start thinking like, have you ever had those thoughts like, oh my gosh, my brother died? And then you literally start crying, right? Like you shed a tear in real life because you're like, and then you're like, wait a minute, why am I thinking about that stuff? I literally, this scripture always comes up in my spirit. And I think about everything that is good, lovely, pure, admirable. And I think about the good things in my life. And I go to sleep like that and knock out after I recite this to myself. Philippians 4:8.
I think that's true for a lot of mental illness, but I also find in certain situations that attitude of like you can conquer this spiritually or with a relationship with God can be a little harmful to people, that medication truly is life-saving.
Well, that depends too. Do they know God? Do they know the power of Jesus? Those are different things that we can talk about another time because we'll be here all night.
I'm a Christian and I take my relationship with God very seriously, but that's not a cure for like stuff like bipolar disorder, medications that are really life-saving. And the way that I heard about it in church was one of the biggest reasons it took me a while to get help, and it almost cost me my life. So.
Yeah, and that also depends on, do you believe the word to be true? Because Jesus is the healer of everything. So it just depends on how strong your faith muscle is and whether or not you really believe you can overcome those things without medication. Because I'm a product of that. Legitimately, I'm a product of that, and I know people that are bipolar and I was suicidal too, and if it wasn't for my relationship with God and somebody showing me, hey, a psychologist actually told me, you don't need meds. Like, this is how I'm going to help you overcome that. Then I saw my other friends that were going to psychologists that had the same issues as I did, and they're still going today. That's the power of Jesus. So be careful what they tell you in church too. Pastors, and you still have to research everything. Pastor could give me my own pastor could give me a scripture in church. I'll be like, let me go check if that's right. And I'll be checking it on every single translation because I have a relationship with God, but I also know the power. There's power behind Jesus. You know what I mean? Don't nullify that by saying I have a relationship with God, but you're nullifying that. There's power in that. You can get there. The tongue, here's another one. Proverbs 18:21. The tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. If you tell yourself, I'm not good enough, you're not going to be good enough. It's in the word. That's it. If you tell yourself, like for me, when I became suicidal was because I told myself I was depressed. I'm depressed, and then I became suicidal. It was true because I told myself, your words are things. When I was little, I used to pretend I was sick from school because I hated school. And I'd be like, ay, mami, no me siento bien. I can't go to school. I have a fever. And I would fake it. By the end of the day, I would I'd be sick. Right? I would be sick because I was a product of my own words. I spoke that into my life. So imagine what we have to speak over the people that do us wrong. Are we praying and saying, oh, God, heal my leg because it hurts today? And then you call up your friend, you're like, girl, my leg hurts still. I don't know what's going on with it. Are you nullifying your prayer with God by continuing to talk about your ailments or somebody that's pissing you off? Or you're saying, hey, God, please change my husband. Give him a heart to want to give me quality time or whatever it is. And then you go and you complain to your girl, oh my God, my husband, he was a complete today. He was a complete jerk. He doesn't know my love language. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. What are you saying? You know what I'm saying? Like if you pray, you got to leave that to God. You just don't talk about it anymore because your words have weight. What's the story with, it's not Abraham. There's a story about an angel that went to someone and said, I'm going to butcher this. Don't quote me. I got to look it up. But there's a story in the Bible about an angel that went to someone and said, you're going to have a baby. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to have a baby. And the angel,
wasn't
Abram?
And Sarai.
Yeah, the angel zipped up his mouth. I don't think it's the same one, is it?
No,
No, no es el mismo.
Is it the same one?
Esposo de Elizabeth, creo que era Elizabeth y Zacarías.
Zacharias? Yes, I think that's it. The angel zipped up his mouth, like closed his mouth so he wouldn't talk for 9 months because he's like, your words are going to mess this up. You better shut up. I mean, that's my translation. That's the LC translation of the Bible. Because God knew that his words could really mess that blessing up. So imagine how, God said, let there be light. He said, let there be light when he created the world. He didn't go and switch on the light. He didn't do it himself. So imagine how you create your world. Or what are you saying? What are you saying and speaking to yourself? What are you speaking into your existence, into your own world? Matthew 12:36. This one scares me. Oh my gosh. This one scares me so much. Matthew 12:36. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak.
Can you read it?
Matthew 12:36. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. 12:36. 12:36. So when you think about that, you're like, man, when I'm sitting around talking about so-and-so all the day, all the time, talking behind their back, I have to give account for that. It's crazy, right? I'm going to give you guys an activity.
Yay!
Thank you. Most people look at me and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. So I want you to take a piece of paper, and on one side of the paper, I want you to write 1 to 2 things. You can do this together, or you can do it on your own. I want you to write 1 to 2 things that you have said to somebody that annoys you, something that they're doing that is wrong, or maybe they did something to you that is wrong. And then on the other side, I want you to write down a way to say that to them without attacking their character. So here's an example. My husband didn't take out the trash. It annoys the heck out of me, right? I hate it when that happens. He doesn't take it out on time. The truck goes by. They miss it. So instead of me saying, honey, why didn't you take out the trash? You should have done that. What's the matter with you? I'll say, when you don't take out the trash, so I want you to start with when. When you don't take out the trash, it makes me feel like you don't really want to help me around the house. So it's more of like you have to add feel in there too. How it makes you feel, that action, not so much what the person is or what you think they are. Does that make sense? So it's not you're an idiot because you didn't take out the trash. It's you make me feel, I feel that you don't really care about taking care of the home when you don't take out the trash. Isn't that a lot less aggressive? And it's more about how it makes you feel as opposed to making the person feel like, I almost cussed. Making the person feel like an idiot. Does that make sense? It's hard. You got to think about it, right? You got it already?
There's one thing, yeah.
So how would you word that? Is that the one you were thinking about?
Yeah, when you scream to him, it makes me feel stressed out. But the thing is, like, how I don't know if that's how I feel.
Yeah.
But then it's like she's not learning anything anyways. Like how are we teaching her?
Yeah. And that's what you can say after that when you see that he received, because at first people are going to receive that, what seems like criticism. Our flesh initially receives it like, what's that supposed to mean? You know what I mean? Wrong. But then the second thing is to overcome your flesh and say, you know what, let me go in this with the best intention, thinking that, okay, what's really being said here? And so we have to remind ourselves that a lot of people don't have that mentality. Their flesh automatically is like, well, they want to be on the defensive. And so we have to continue to talk to them in a low volume and continue to explain to them, I'm just expressing how I feel, how it makes me feel. And it helps them too, because it makes them, when you're vulnerable with somebody else, it actually knocks down a lot of walls. They appreciate that because you're trusting them with your vulnerability of how it makes you feel.
Do you think, for instance, in her situation, is it better to address her right away, right after he just yelled at her daughter, or like just let a few hours pass by and communicate like how she feels?
It depends on how the timing for him, because all the guys, their timing is very different. So if my husband is in the middle of yelling at my stepdaughter, I don't say anything. I literally bite my tongue, and then later on that night when he's a little bit calmer, then I'll say, hey, honey, it made, she may have felt this way when you had done this. Because you think of it as yourself, when I'm in the middle of yelling, I don't want my husband to sit there and correct me afterwards and tell me I don't care how it makes you feel. I'm yelling right now. You know what I mean? Like, I just put myself in his shoes. And I say, why don't you come at me when I'm in a calmer state, in a little more joyful state, ready to receive? Because when you're in a situation and there's anger in it or there's yelling, there's not much that people can receive from that. They're not going to learn much. But when they're in a state of, like, open, okay, hey, can I talk to you? When would be a good time to talk about that situation? Because I think, there's some things I want to ask you about, but I don't feel like right now is the right time. Does that answer your question? All right, who's got some? Your work?
Yeah, because I'm single, so I pretty much spend my entire day at work. So I was trying to figure out like how this sort of relates to my interactions with my team.
Yeah.
So because I'm a consultant, Maria and I work together. So my interaction with my team is like, okay, I have a lot of junior team members.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a sense of entitlement there among certain team members at times. So it's in order to best communicate, like, okay, there is a reason behind what we're doing and why we're doing, and at times like I may have an unconscious bias or somebody else may have an unconscious bias. So it's like just coming across in the best and appropriate manner.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I don't want to offend you, but I also want to communicate this in the appropriate way.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
That's how I was sort of thinking about it.
Yeah. I think it's a whole nother ball game communicating with millennials
Yeah.
this day and age. Like, they don't have much of an attention span, and they're offended by everything. No offense if you're a millennial in here, but, like, I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about my brothers, like, they're just, my dad is offended by everything. I could just say, my husband's white, and he's offended that he's white because Donald Trump is in office, and I'm like, what the heck is happening here? Like, what? He kind of has a millennial mentality where he's just offended. So they need a little bit more nurturing when you're talking to them and a little bit more care.
Yeah. I feel like, I'm not, so maybe the age difference between us is like 2 or 3 years. I'm 2 or 3 years older to them, but it still feels like I came from such a different place. Was like, you guys are like, okay, what? It's just really weird. Like,
yeah.
Okay, I have to explain every time, like, why this needs to be done and why X needs to be done, why Z needs to be done, why it doesn't need to be done that way. So
yeah.
It's just like, okay.
It's also a mindset thing too.
Yeah.
Like, if you didn't grow up working hard your whole life, there's only so much you're going to understand.
Exactly. So
When
there are like cultural differences as well, which come into play. So I feel like we're in such a crazy time that, when you're working in such a team setting, it requires that there needs to be like time given, but you don't have that kind of time
Yeah.
because you're in such a rush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I'm not doing that anymore. Oh my gosh, girl. We're going to have to talk about
I'm
that.
trying to figure
So don't ever, like, when you're bringing something up and it's dismissed, don't ever think that you're not planting the seed. Because you said something, the seed is there. And they're going to think about it. And they're going to be like, oh, maybe she was right. You know what I mean? So don't lose hope.
Yeah.
Don't lose hope with stupid people. No, I'm just kidding. Just don't lose hope. All right, so I did bring my book here. A lot of the communication stuff, everything that I talked about is in here. I also have Foundation of Marriage, The Way Men and Women Are Wired, Red Flags and Baggage, Unrealistic Expectations, which was really big for me, Communication and Finances in Marriage, Social Media in Your Marriage. Never heard anybody talk about how to deal with social media and your marriage at the same time. Multicultural and faith differences, which is usually an issue that I hear a lot of. My husband isn't a believer, or I'm not a believer. How can we connect? What do we do about this? And a lot of other stuff. So this is my book. It's a handbook for marriage, but also a lot of single people buy it too, just to kind of understand how to communicate or understand how to deal with the relationships around them, and also deal with a lot of things that are happening inside, because this isn't to fix your husband. This is really to build you. And so people that are engaged or divorced or whatever, they'll read this as more of a personal development book than anything else. So I do have them for sale there for $20 today. And then also, and I'll sign them for you as well. And then also, you guys have cell phones on you? Take out your cell phones and text. You guys like free stuff? Text Rookie, ROOKIE, to 31996. Rookie to 31996. You don't have to get up. You can do that later.
Yeah, yeah.
What is it, 311?
31996. There you're going to get a link to my website that has a sign up where you can get a free video on balance, how to balance your family, your kids, your husband, your career. And that's a free training that I'm giving to everybody. And then you'll get free communication tips, free social media tips, and then also other free videos that are there as well along the process. Along the way. Thank you guys so much for having me. Did you guys learn anything? Yeah? Good.
Sometimes we were talking about resources.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other specific recommendations or links or books or additional things that we should look into?
Yeah, there's a ton of resources in here, in the back of the book, and then as you read it, as you're going, there's a lot of resources, books, not iPods, podcasts, different things that you can get from here. Because that's why it's so thin, because I wasn't going to cover, again, what they covered. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you guys can get that'll be able to further along your personal development.